And I think for any fintech brand out there, I think authenticity is more critical than ever because people are going to call you out the moment you step afoul of that. When they go, you said this on your website, but when I see this, that's not true.
Well, I appreciate you being here. So Binna is the CEO and co-founder of Vested. Binna, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about you and your background and how you ended up getting to where you are, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm one of the co-founders and the president of Vested. We're an integrated agency focused on financial services and fintech. We started the agency about over 5 years ago now, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. But we started it after we had our Jerry Maguire moment, up and quit the last agency we were running to start a firm that we really believed in. And I actually have spent the most of my career in marketing and communications for financial services. Before that, I wanted to be a journalist, but I gave up on that pretty quickly. That's a little bit about me.
Cool. So I want to ask you, there's so many things I want to ask you, and it's just, there's women, there's fintech, there's we can talk about cryptocurrency. I don't even want to go there.
We can talk about anything. Yeah.
Okay. Let's start with fintech. What are you seeing in the 5 years that you've begun this company? Like, what are you seeing now, and how is that sort of affecting the world? And then we'll.
Sure. So yeah, I've been fortunate to be working with financial technology companies for the majority of my career, even before fintech was really a word that your average consumer would know. About probably more than 5 years ago now, you started to see these upstarts coming into the industry. So Betterment in the robo advisory space, Robinhood with trading, and others. And they came up as challenger brands, right? We're disrupting the status quo, the unbank, for example, or the anti-bank. And that gave them a foothold in what has otherwise been a pretty challenging industry to break into in financial services, which is dominated by the large powerhouses. What happened over the last 5 years and probably longer is a convergence. So the challenger brands, as they grew market share and revenue and user bases, they have to start being more mature. They have to seem more grown up. And at the same time, the big brands, so Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, et cetera, they needed to feel more disruptive. They need to feel more innovative. And they did that by either acquiring fintech. So Goldman Sachs Marcus is a great example of that. Even the acquisition of E-Trade, for example, by Morgan Stanley. Like, all of these are good examples of how these two forces are coming together. And what that means is we're going to see increasing acquisition, so more startups being acquired by the big players, and at the same time, more significant investments by the traditional financial services firms to build or buy technology divisions that allow them to play more strongly in the space.
And how was it like being a female-led team in an innovative space that has sort of we'll call it parallel, that there's these big established things and then a smaller company like setting that up?
I'd like to say that it was easy. I will say that I think, part of the reason why I started Vested was, one, I wanted to be a good example of being a female entrepreneur in this space, and also to create a more inclusive environment, not just of women, but I think just a more diverse and inclusive environment overall, which sometimes, whether you look at the agency space or financial services and fintech, it's not always very well known for diversity and inclusion. And I think, one, being a female entrepreneur gives me a really good perspective, I hope. But also, I think the ability to help our brands better shape their messages to be more diverse and inclusive, I think that's pretty important. And it hasn't always been easy, because sometimes, you get the sense that maybe, if you're talking to like a fintech founder, that maybe he's not taking you as seriously if, it was coming from someone who was high. But also, I think in terms of chatting to female-led technology firms, I mean, they have said a lot that it's harder to get funding sometimes if you're a female founder. VCs sometimes for whatever reason don't take you as seriously. It's sometimes unconscious bias too. Sometimes it's not like deliberate bias, but unconscious bias that might lead them to ask different questions or to put greater merit in certain ideas more than others, just because of the gender of the person they're chatting to. So while I think things have changed for the better, I still think there's a lot of room to grow in our industry.
A lot. And I think in all industries, like, so as part of my Run SME strategy, I got placed as a fellow in this organization called Athena out of San Diego. And they have a mission to empower 1 million or advance 1 million women in STEM. And what was interesting is they're advocating this. Ironically, it's the big banks that are saying, we won't invest in you unless you have something close to parity or 40% of women on boards. So does that impact how your sort of internal mission or how you communicate with people, how you support them by saying, hey, this parity, this diversity, and not just women, obviously, like gender, non-gender, et cetera. Does that change your strategy? Is it heart of strategy? How do you approach those conversations with the people that you're working with?
I think we really encourage our clients to have a point of view and to put action behind their DE&I initiatives. And I think whether it's, we're not going to invest in companies unless their board demonstrates stronger diversity, or it could be looking at how they recruit or how they employ people, making sure that the products and services that they're selling or marketing are being marketed more inclusively. I think all of that is really important. And I think these bold statements by brands is important because I think it almost creates stronger pressure on the brands that haven't taken those actions to do so. It turns the spotlight on the people who aren't doing anything. And I actually think that's been really beneficial. I think any action is important. I think the thing that we counsel our clients on is like, I don't want you to just put out rhetoric. It's really easy to just say a whole bunch of stuff that might make you feel better about, having a point of view or that you're doing something, but you aren't doing something unless you action it, and change doesn't happen overnight. I think during the height of, civil unrest in 2020, and honestly, that never stops. I think, especially when a lot of protests were happening around the country, I think a lot of, brands attempted to just put out statements, right? Put out an Instagram post, put out a tweet, put out an email, and make people feel like we are there for you. But if it's not followed by action, it's empty. It's worse because I don't want people to feel deluded by the idea that as long as I put out a statement, I've done something. No, it's got to be followed by true action, monetary commitment, accountability. And so I've been really excited by the change that we've seen so far, but there's certainly a lot more room to grow.
Yeah. Well, I find it interesting. I mean, being somebody who works in PR and talking about earned media, you can spin that story however you want, but I think especially sophisticated people, they're going to smell the bullshit pretty fast, and you're not going to get like a bang for your buck. And I mean, again, as a corollary to the overall banking market, is that you have so much competition in something that's been commoditized. So how can you, create that differentiation? And then from like a blue ocean, red ocean strategy, eventually that differentiation is no longer going to be differentiation. It's going to be commonplace. So I guess my question is, how do you see that transition going? And what do you see coming down the road in all of those things? That's a big question.
So how can folks differentiate themselves further in this type of an environment? I
guess so. I don't really know what, it's just, there's so many different pieces to it that go beyond just the PR part, because from a PR part, you're just reporting and amplifying people's good stuff.
Right.
And so I guess it sort of predicates that they're doing good stuff before you can actually help them.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think it's an interesting time to be in the space because I don't know if you saw this news, but like Andreessen Horowitz, for example, caused some headlines yesterday because they are planning to build out their own media brand. And there are so many different ways now in which brands can communicate their stories. It's not even through traditional PR. they're kind of, the idea of, being your own journalist, self-publishing, communicating directly and circumventing the media is probably going to continue to be a bigger and bigger trend, which is a little sad for journalism, to be honest. But I think part of the rise of social media, the ability for brands to attract customers directly onto their platforms means, one, there's more competition for messaging. Also, our lives are the channels in which people can communicate to us as a customer or consumer have only proliferated. Plus, a ton of data about us now. So they vary that message really significantly based on who I am and what I want to consume. So I think you could look at it as like, if you're a PR person or a marketer, you have never had more opportunity to get stuff done on behalf of your clients. But it also means that you can't just take one message and blast it out to a whole bunch of people via press releases and ads and hope that it sticks. I think as consumers, we are expecting personalization, that you're going to know me better than maybe I even know myself. I was joking with my team the other day, like, you can go on your Instagram feed, for example, and you can actually check out your account and see what your Instagram has profiled you as, based on what types of ads are servicing to you. And you're like, wow, how do you know me so well? Same thing with Netflix, right? I bet when you open up your Netflix, the content that it's pushing to you is totally different than what's being pushed to me. And I think that whether you call it marketing or brand or advertising, whatever it might be, I think it's a huge opportunity, and the change that we're going to see in how brands communicate and market themselves over the next decade are going to be revolutionary.
So within that, and especially within the fintech space, outside of the sort of core marketing part, what are you seeing from your clients without giving away anybody's like secret sauce or anything like that?
Yeah.
Are you seeing it's the personalization that's moving and seeing it's like the decentralization? Are you seeing, smaller organizations supporting? Like, what are the trends that you're seeing in that world?
Yeah, I think in fintech, I think what's happening is, one, more and more fintechs are having to move upstream. And the reason for that is, if you've been a fintech that's been around for a few years now, right? You're past let's say your Series A and your Series B, and you're either angling for an IPO or acquisition, or obviously a huge next step in your growth. And I alluded to this at the beginning, is you have to grow true share of wallet, right? It can't come from just like the number of free accounts that people have, but actually like, where are the dollars being made amongst your customers? And those tend to be customers with larger portfolios, larger wallets, or either paying for a more premium service. But those people, the more affluent you get, right? Whether you're someone who's saving or spending, or you're investing, whatever your fintech proposition might be, we're now talking about people who have more wealth in some capacity. And if you're a wealthy person, or you are wealthy, or you're someone who's coming into more and more wealth just because you've been earning for a longer period of time, you want to know that your finances are in a good place, right? Like, for example, for you, this is a personal question, but like, where do you bank?
I bank at Royal Bank of Canada.
Okay.
Because I'm in Canada.
Have you ever been tempted to try out like a challenger bank, or like a neobank, or like some upstart bank that doesn't have like a branch down the street?
I was with, Tangerine, used to be ING Direct for a little bit. And then I've done some, hopefully nobody just like starts cracking all my passwords. And then I had like a Wealth Simple account to be like, okay, let's see how this goes. And then I invest with a financial advisor.
Right. So you're someone who's in the know. And if I ask my team is largely like people who are younger in their 20s. Like, when I go around the room and I say, who do you bank with? Wells Fargo, Bank of America. And I say, we are like avid supporters of fintech, but yet everybody is still working with the Bank of Americas and the Wells Fargos of the world. And why is that? There is still a trust factor that you have, that there is an institution where you've put your money, and when like if we are facing a zombie apocalypse, there is some comfort in knowing I can maybe head to the branch and still get my money out, versus it being online somewhere that you can't see. And that's just like a human instinct, right? It's this idea that like it's somewhere safe. As a result, I think fintechs are trying to create that safety for their customers. You're actually seeing more of that with people opening up branches or offices that people can walk into. And I think you see that not just in fintech, but overall, like traditional online providers opening up physical space, because that physicality is what creates comfort, that there's a place that I can go to. And so more and more fintechs are now starting to look a bit more like the traditional financial institution, with offices, humans that you can talk to, speaking a more mature language than what was originally 5 years ago, all about like, we're fighting the financial services industry. Now it's actually, no, we're safe. We can work with you, whether you're 20 or 30, 40, 50, they're going for the retirees. So that's really starting to change how these fintechs are marketing themselves.
So we talked about trust. We talked about the personalization. We talked about that like physicality and like that shifting gears, and now putting you on the hot seat.
Totally.
And how has that been as a founder, as a female founder? How was the process of building trust? What did you take away, or what were some of those lessons learned as a female leader as you started this company, attracted people, obviously built like a good sized company with a lot of people? What was that process, and what were some of those key learnings that you learned as a owner and as well as a female founder, which I hate using the term, but you understand for the context why I'm asking you the question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm a pretty big believer in authenticity. And I think trust is built, especially when you're new, right? No one knows you really, but they have to see that you've got follow through. So it's not just what you say, but that you live that every day. And when we were building a team, when we were like no people, we were building a team, we had a vision and we had values. But no one would trust us if, when they experienced our culture or workplace, how we work with our clients, if what we did was the opposite of what we said. And so I'm a strong believer in, flat management, entrepreneurship, that it doesn't matter where you came from, how old you are, whether you have more experience than another person. I believe everybody has an equal right to have an opinion and a point of view. And we live that every day. That's part of, we're called vested because everybody is vested in the company. And I think if I said that to people, but when they walked in the door, they didn't feel like they had a point of view, they didn't feel vested, they didn't feel like they had a seat at the table, I lose that trust pretty quickly. And I think we have to then spread those values throughout the organization. So even beyond just the founders, that if our clients are dealing with one of our besties, as we call them, they have to also feel that too. So trust is built through authenticity. And I think for any fintech brand out there, I think authenticity is more critical than ever, because people are going to call you out the moment you step afoul of that. When they go, you said this on your website, but when I see this, that's not true. You are not being true to who you are as a brand. And so I think whether as a woman that makes me better able to be authentic, I'm not sure about that. Maybe. I think it certainly helps me be more empathetic. But I think even as a founder, for any founder, I think sticking to your values, being authentic to the vision, and living that each and every day, and allowing people to hold you accountable to that is really important.
That's interesting. And so I find it, I'm sort of balancing with, we have people live, there's people going to watch on YouTube, people listening on the podcast, and actually from all over the world. I know already Sudan and Nigeria, and I have no idea what time it is for you, like joining in the conversation. Yeah. But it's interesting, like the intercultural differences between, trust, relationship building. And I believe that from what you shared, that trust, authenticity, and like follow through is key no matter where you are, because the power has shifted from the company to like the consumer. Like consumers have this wealth of knowledge they can access anytime, and they can like sniff you out fast. Have you found that a challenge as growing a company and you're founded in New York, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you found that, that authenticity being a tool for you to grow to, I think you're at 50 people. Is that right?
Yeah, we're actually more than that now. I think we're close to like 80 or 90.
Oh, damn. All right. Awesome.
Yeah.
So how have you found that playing out as you've grown your company, and how like sort of the ripple effect of that has done in what I would consider a tight community? And I was there for a little while, so I know a bit about it, but not much.
Yeah. I think it's healthy and painful sometimes. And what I mean by that is, I think as a founder, and I think if any founders are listening, you probably feel this, is you wake up every day with sometimes a crisis of confidence, but also like, are we doing this right? Like, have we gone afoul of our original vision? And I think as you get bigger and bigger, the feeling of dilution is very real, right? There's dilution of equity, but like dilution of culture and the core, right? How do you keep preserving that as you grow? And so when people call you out on that, right? They said, you said this. Actually, I felt this way. It is really hard because some part of you wants to go, no, that's not right. What we founded is what we created. But I also think it's really healthy because you need people to hold you accountable. It's the way you stay on path is when the people around you, especially people you trust, are able to say, guys, we're starting to veer off in this direction, but we need to get back on track. Like, you need those people in your life. And I think as founders, one of the most critical things for success is not just that you've got great co-founders, and not every founder is lucky enough to have partners like I do, but to also have a really great leadership team. And that leadership team shares the same values, but also holds you accountable to staying on track. Like, where I see a lot of fintechs go awry is when they don't have good leadership teams that don't have that level of accountability, and they're yes men. And if you have a leadership team who are just yes men and just nod to you and tell you that whatever you say is right, you've already gone wrong. And so I think it's really important that you've got people around you who are willing to tell you, no, you're wrong, and we can do better.
Yep. And I want to especially highlight that for the people that are in like nonprofit organizations, is because you have even less incentive for conflict. Isn't it so much easier to be a yes person in a not-for-profit because you don't have anything at stake? For you and your employees, it's your money. It's your future. When you're like a volunteer on a board, despite being sort of financially, it's a lot easier to avoid those conversations because you're like, it'll sort itself out.
Right.
Do you do any, are you on any boards or support any not-for-profits in your spare time?
I do. So I support this actually really great nonprofit who I was chatting with just before I jumped on this call, which is an association focused on the Asian American community in investment management. And a lot of what they're trying to do is raise greater awareness, sometimes the lack of leadership opportunities and investment opportunities that exist for Asian American and Pacific Islander fund managers. And so about greater representation for them, especially given the D&I conversation that continues to happen within financial services. I think what they do is really great. And then I also am a part of Chief, which is a women's executive network. And I found that it's great because I get to connect with other female founders and female executives and chat about issues from workplace culture, being a working mom to much, much more. So, and then Vested, we support a number of nonprofits as well. So we support this really great organization called 51 Labs, which is an accelerator for refugees out in the Middle East. And we also support the Museum of American Finance, which is a nonprofit and the only finance museum in the United States. So we also support a number of pro bono causes as well.
That is awesome. I mean, I think it's important to have that corporate responsibility part of it, especially if you've got a model. Just before this call, I was listening to Chris Hadfield, who is a Canadian astronaut, and he was saying, to expand and bring as much of your team. And then as you expand your sort of human experience, that it's not your duty, but like to be able to pass that on to other people because you got to live at the edge of it. And I really took that away. It's why I like doing podcasts like this, is I have the opportunity to speak with incredibly smart people with you. And it's sort of like my opportunity and duty to then like get that into as many people as possible, including like clients and non-clients and stuff like that. So grateful to chat with you. I want to take a step back to what I was asking about your company growth, and then making sure you follow through on what you say. Have you had an experience where you changed your mind? Like, it's your prerogative to change your mind, to actually say, I know I said this, and now I'm saying this. And I don't know if the the fact that you're a woman founder complicates that, because you just everything is more complicated by being a person of color or a different ethnicity, and the fact that you're a woman. So, you know, have you had that experience, and how did you manage that with your team or just internally?
That's a good question. The thing that immediately jumped into mind, which I don't know if it's something where I said one thing and then something else came to be, is, you know, I think for the pandemic, when we all started January 2020, I don't think any of us truly anticipated what the year was going to be like. And luckily my co-founder is like a complete paranoid fanatic when it comes to health and diseases and pandemic issues. And back in January, he was like, this Wuhan virus is going to be a real thing and we need to be prepared. So luckily we were more prepared than I would say most. But come around March, we realized we are going to have to go remote. We don't know what the economic impact is going to be of a global pandemic. And at the time, you know, I wanted to be as confident and reassuring to our team as possible. And I said, guys, we are in this together. We're going to do the best that we can. I am really confident that we are going to emerge successful on the other side, because I did feel confident. I felt confident that we're not going to go out of business. We have a really good model. You know, like we have run businesses through different crises and market downturns. I was really confident in ultimately our success. And then I would say in early April, we realized we aren't sure what the market environment is going to be like. And this is when things were completely frozen. Clients were doing layoffs. And we said, you know what, we have to be prepared for the worst. And so we took pay cuts at the executive team level. We had to make a couple of furloughs. And we said, we've got to hunker down, preserve cash, embrace for the worst. And at the time, I think it was alarming for people because, one, it's like a wake-up call to the fact that this might not all be as okay as we thought it was going to be. And in my mind, it wasn't reversing on what I said, but maybe a change in tone that was really alarming for people, especially like, you know, I do have a young team, and I think, you know, I've been through like, you know, post-11 and, you know, 2008 crisis and like lots of layoffs. But for a lot of my, you know, younger team members, this is the first real like global crisis that they've been through. And it was like a sudden wake up call that like, holy crap, like maybe everything is not going to be okay. And I think maybe even some people felt like, you told me everything was going to be okay, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be okay. And it's hard as a founder because I want to project confidence and conviction, but at the same time, I've got to act with some degree of paranoia to protect the company at the end of the day and preserve as many jobs as we possibly can. And so it's hard because I think this is like the constant tension as a leader, right? It's like, you've got to like take some actions that are meant to be protectionary and help folks, but at the same time, you want to reassure your teams and make them feel okay and give them comfort, but not also mislead them that everything is truly okay. It's like you've got to kind of bring some degree of a reality check while also providing some comfort. And so I think it's hard for, I mean, I'm a mom too. And like, of course I have like a mothering instinct, which is like, it's all going to be okay. And like, everybody gets like a warm hug and some hot chocolate. But at the same time, as a business owner, I've also got to be really real with folks too. So I don't know if that's a contradiction as much as it's like a natural tension that exists as a founder. So, and I hope like people have seen that like all those moves that we made are ultimately what led us to have a really great, successful year and keep a lot of people in their jobs and make more money at the end of the day. So,
yeah. Well, what I take away from that, among other things, is the need for different leadership styles. As in, you might have had that like rah rah, everything's going to be fine tone here, and I don't think it's like changing. I think it's adapting to say, actually, now what we need is assertive leadership. And like, I don't need the permission from anybody. I'm just like, hey, this is what we need. And I need to like steer the ship, because we have another group that we work with that the leadership style has changed, and they've got several hundred employees. And now the like culture impacts of that have changed. So it's not just the decisions of one, it's that it's sort of floating through. And then you sort of have to deal with it. And then I guess it's like the response are people responding to it now? Or is it going to be a thing that like in a year and a half, they're like, wow, it's like, you know it, but does your team know it at those multiple layers to say, hey, that was actually a really good call, but we can't see the forest through the trees right now because we're still in the shit. 2023, we're going to say, wow, it's so good that Binna just like did what she did. And then now,
right.
But obviously you're not saying
it's hard in the moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you're in the shit, you're still on fire. And we're going to be in that position for maybe a year or more, or whenever you listen to this podcast, we'll see how it goes. So, how are you feeling about, do I want to ask you that? Yeah. How are you feeling about the future moving forward as a founder in the United States? There we go. Let's make it more personal.
I think I always believe that in the best possible outcome, and that people will come through at the end of the day. So I feel hopeful. I think you always have to operate with some degree of paranoia, which is like, oh my God, like we don't know how long this pandemic is going to rage on. But against that my team has shown, but also I think change that we keep seeing happening. So
I get that. So I'll ask you one question, which is really two questions bundled in.
Yeah, go for it.
As we move forward, it's sort of like we have female leaders, male leaders, just leaders in general. So part of my question is, what do you want to tell those people that they can like take away? But the other question is, what are you looking forward to as your next challenge in leadership? What is something that you're right now that you haven't overcome and that you're still like dancing with and grappling with? So I'm going to take those two and put them together.
Great question. And the answers are probably related. The thing that I often say, especially to female entrepreneurs, is you have to make sacrifices. And it kind of sucks because as a mom in particular, you know, you always feel like you're failing somebody, right? Like, I'm not there enough for my team. I'm not there enough for my kids. You know, I'm not there enough as a spouse because like you only have so much time in your day. Like you can't show up for everything. So you can't make every, you know, school event, and you can't make every meeting. You can't, like, it's just impossible, right? So sacrifices have to be made. And I hear a lot from, you know, women executives that feeling of failure, like I am not doing enough, is so pervasive that we internalize it as women, right? And we almost feel like we have to make a choice. It's either career or family. If I want to be a good mom, I can't progress in my career because we internalize it and we say, it's because I am not capable of being an entrepreneur, of starting my own company and being a good mom. And what I always try and tell people is you have to take that feeling and realize it's not you, it's our circumstances, and accept that like that tension is going to exist, but accept that like it's not you. It's not like because you're not good at something or because you're not strong enough to be an entrepreneur. Recognize that our circumstances have accelerated the expectations about like what it means to be a good mom. You have to send your kids to like a billion extracurriculars and cook some organic lunch boxes and you know, like, you know, microwave meals are bad. And at the same time at work, like work hours have expanded. We're always on, like someone's always calling my phone and demanding a response. And so the demands on women executives have grown. And so I always tell people it's okay to accept that failure, what your definition of failure is, it's okay because you're not actually failing. Everything that you make show up to is a win, and you should be really proud of yourself. And I say that especially to female founders because sometimes you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, what am I doing? How can I really do this? So I say accept that. And I would say for me, I think the thing that I've got to probably the challenge for me as a leader is the ability to focus on me and like self-care. I think some of the things that happen especially as a working woman is you give everything of yourself to your company and to your family, that sometimes the you in the equation is like totally lost. And so for me as a leader, it's saying like, okay, I need to find that me time so I can focus on projects that are for me personally, personal, you know, passions and ambitions outside of just my company and my family. And so finding the headspace to do that is one of my big New Year's resolutions for the year.
Well, I could see both of those fighting each other at the same time.
Absolutely.
Which is the constant battle. And I think all
Yeah.
business owners, entrepreneurs, and then pile on, the situation around COVID, wherever you're at, is that there's those external things. But, it's nowhere to go but up. And there's no actual thing as failure. It's not a failure of self. It's, if anything, a failure of action. But Binna, how can people get a hold of you? How can they learn more about Vested? How can they get engaged with you and your community?
Sure. You can visit our website, which is www.fullyvested.com. You can find me on Twitter at Binna S. Kim. You can also find me on LinkedIn. So hopefully I get to chat to any one of you sometime soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Binna. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and just great to connect with you one-on-one.
It was fun. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today, Binna Kim, who is the president and co-founder of Vested. Thanks so much for joining us. If you have a female founder, there's a founder in your life that needs to take that next step in their life, be sure to share them this podcast and episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And this is Anthony Taylor from the Strategy and Leadership Podcast, joined by Binna Kim. Thanks again, Binna.
Lovely to be here.
We'll see you next time, everybody. Take care.